Okay, let's do a couple more examples here. So this is f function is a square root of x, so that means if I graph it, it would look something like this. So this means that the domain would be 0 to infinity. If I graph this, it's linear, so g of x is negative infinity to infinity. So knowing the domain of our original functions is going to help us find the domain of our next functions. So I want to find f of g of x. So I'm going to have f of g of x. So the g function is the domain of the f function. So I'm going to have f of x minus 3. Now I'm going to go put x minus 3 in place of x here. So the new function looks like this. Let's talk about the domain though. The domain always starts with the domain of what's inside. And the domain of what's inside here was negative infinity to infinity. So I know that this domain is going to start off as negative infinity to infinity, but I may have to tweak it. So I want to think about, is it okay to have any kind of number I want under a square root? What do you think? Is it okay to have 0 under a square root? Sure, because the square root of 0 is 0. Is it okay to have a negative number under a square root? The answer to that is no, because that would be an imaginary number. So I don't want values under here to be negative. If I put a 3 under here, 3 minus 3 is 0. 3 is okay. But what happens if I put 2 under here? 2 minus 3 would be negative 1. I don't want to put 2 under there. 3 is the smallest number I can put under this radical, so I have to tweak the domain. The domain has to start with 3 and go to infinity. It can't be anything smaller than 3, or I would have an imaginary number. Okay, let's look at the next one. G of f. So let's think about the domain here. The domain is going to be whatever the domain for f is. So it's going to start as 0 to infinity. Now I may have to tweak it in the end, but for now it's going to start as 0 to infinity. So let's go put the f function into the g function. So the f function is going to go into the g function. So I'm going to have the new function is the square root of x subtract 3. Let's see if 0 is okay. Is it okay to put a 0 here? Yep, because 0 minus 3 is negative 3. That's all good, so the domain is fine. Okay, let's go evaluate f of g of 7. So now my input value is 7 into my g function. So I'm going to put 7 here. 7 minus 3 is 4. And now 4 is the input value of my f function. So I'm going to have the square root of 4, which is 2. We don't have a domain on the ones that are the actual values. So this time we're going to find f of 81. So I'm going to put 81 into the f function. And the f function is the square root of x. What is the square root of 81? 9. So now 9 is the input value of the f function. What is the square root of 9? 3. So the answer is 3. Okay, I think we'll skip this next example and go straight to the graph.